It's officially time to be worried about Travis Hunter. We'll tell you why next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Michael Fabiano. You can follow him on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. You can check out all of his great work over on SI. And it's a Wednesday show. So, of course, Matt Williamson is here. It's been a while since we've had Matt on, but he's back from Steelers training camp. Go follow Matt on Twitter at Williamson NFL. And we've got a packed show for you guys today discussing wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, some startup draft tips. But, Matt, let's start with this. We've got a quote from James Gladstone, the Jags GM, talking about Travis Hunter, and I'll read it to you. He says, our understanding that Travis is most naturally comfortable, most naturally in tune on the defensive side of the ball. We wanted to load him up offensively throughout this window to ensure that by the time we got to training camp, we had a runway buildup on that side because there's so much more nuance, so much more adjustment in real time on the offensive side of the ball that would require more learning. He said that it's not necessarily true that he is a wide receiver first, corner second. How concerned does this have you about Travis Hunter's dynasty value?
I don't love hearing it's not a foregone conclusion he's a receiver first, corner second. But I always say the 2 times of the year that NFL teams don't lie to us is free agency where they spend their money and on draft day. And the investment, the massive investment that the Jacksonville Jaguars made to get to 2 implies that they're going to use him all over the place all the time, and after that happened in my rookie drafts, I aggressively got up to 1-2 to take Hunter over Hampton, Ted McMillan, all those guys. I think he's that special of a prospect, the mental makeup, maybe the receiver thing in year 1 doesn't blow us away, but let's not be short-sighted here. I think this is a special player, and if his stock dropped by 5%, I'm buying him even heavier.
Fabs.
I agree. We were never going to know what position he's going to focus on until we get into training camp. And, I remember getting into arguments with people on X about that because there was an initial report. The Jaguars saw him mostly as a wide receiver. We all know social media. You never see anything false on there. So we just don't know. We won't know. The talent is there. And this is something that, as a fantasy analyst who's been doing this for well over 2 decades, I've never run into before because he's a unicorn. We have never seen a player come into the league who promises to potentially play 2 sides of the football at a high level. I mean, I remember Deion Sanders playing wide receiver at times for the Cowboys, but we always knew that he was a cornerback who was playing some wide receiver. And so from a fantasy perspective, you weren't going to be playing Deion Sanders in most weeks. But things are different with Travis Hunter because, as Matt said, the Jaguars moved up. They sent a lot of draft capital to make that move. And so they're going to utilize him. It might be a bit of a slow burn. It also depends on how much Travis Hunter can take. The college season is not as long as the NFL season. And the NFL wants to keep extending their season. That's another story. So how many snaps can this kid realistically play on offense and defense throughout a full 17-game slate? I think that's something else we have to keep in mind. But with that being said, I love the talent. I love the excitement around him. And I kind of want a little piece of Travis Hunter when it comes to draft time.
And Marcus, real quick on Hunter. Even if he's not out there for every offensive snap, he probably won't be. I mean, okay, fine. But the snaps he's out there, I'm sure they're going to try to get the ball in his hands. It's probably red zone where he scores touchdowns, 3rd downs when they throw the football. I doubt he's in there in short yardage situations when they're in 12 personnel pounding the rock. They're going to be high leverage situations. And I know we're talking about at one point here on the show who's wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. It's a long way away, but Hunter's one of the few that could actually hold that title someday.
Yeah, and my thing that I keep coming back to, Matt, is that you don't give up the 5th pick of the draft and a 2026 first-round pick and pick 36, by the way. Don't forget about that pick, to have a corner that just plays a few snaps on a receiver. Like, you don't do that. You trade up for Travis Hunter because you believe he's somebody that can help change your offense. And that's why I'm not stressing out about this too much. I agree with you guys. Like, it might be part-time as a rookie, but I think when it's all said and done, I think he's going to play more snaps at receiver than corner because the NFL just values receivers more than they do cornerbacks.
And the way to look at it is he going to play more receiver than corner? I only care about how much receiver he plays. I don't care about how much corner he plays. Yeah. We're talking about fantasy football here, right?
I also think you have to factor in that he's got a pretty massive roadblock in actually being an alpha wide receiver because Brian Thomas Jr. was exceptional last season. He's an LSU guy, and you know how I love my trends. These guys don't fade away after a good year or two, and so the ceiling, I wouldn't say the ceiling is limited with Travis Hunter from a wide receiver perspective because I feel like that's already baked into it. But Brian Thomas Jr., unless something horrible happens or unforeseen, is going to be the number 1 wide receiver and the alpha for Trevor Lawrence for a long time.
I mean, this offense, I'm just excited to watch because of Brian Thomas, because of Travis Hunter. Real quick, Fabs, I want to ask you about this. Travis Hunter, wide receiver 15 in our latest batch of Dynasty League ADP, going behind players like Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson. Does that feel right, or is it a little too low?
A little too low. I've got him at wide receiver 19 right now, and I will be reassessing all of my rankings here as we get closer to the 4th of July, and then things really start ramping up for us. But right now I've got him at wide receiver 19. So it's ballpark, but it's a little too high for me.
What do you think, Matt? Where would you have him?
Who are the names you're saying he was going right behind?
Jackson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver 11, Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 13, Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 14.
Harrison's the only one I would consider that I might prefer Hunter. Those other ones to me are established enough that I'll take the bird in the hand despite my love for Hunter.
All right. Let's talk about wide receiver 1 in Dynasty Leagues. Who is it? Who should it be? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and your spending in one place so you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. My family started using Monarch Money about 6 months ago, and we realized how much money we were spending on pointless stuff like food delivery, coffee runs, football cards, whatever it was. We were spending a lot of money on things we just didn't need to spend. But now we are taking control of our finances with Monarch Money, and you can as well. Go use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. The next question comes from Jake. He says, I always see Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase ranked 1, 2, 2, 1. And I just always take whoever's best available or whoever's available. He wants to know, how big is the difference between Chase, who right now is wide receiver 1, and Justin Jefferson? And how big is the gap between those two receivers and CeeDee Lamb at number 3? Matt, why don't you go first?
Well, let's talk about the Chase Jefferson gap for openers. Speaking of LSU receivers, by the way, not too bad. And frankly, Malik Neighbors is my number 3. So I know that's a little controversial. No offense to you Dallas CeeDee Lamb fella there, but
that's fine.
Neighbors is really exciting to me. Anyway, it's minimal to me, Chase to Jefferson. I prefer Chase. He's a year younger. He's got a better quarterback. Okay. I also think a huge factor in Chase's favor is the Bengals defense is just so atrocious that they only have one path to victory. They don't have Flores and playmakers on defense. It's possibly the worst defense in the league. So their game scripts are going to be just like last year. We got to win this one 38-35, and that's really good for throwing the football and trusting Burrow. But I also think the Vikings coaching staff is something in the positive column, to say the least. I'm pretty sure Jefferson is the most productive wide receiver in NFL history in yards per game.
Mm-hmm.
So we're splitting hairs here. I mean, if I have 1-1, I'm taking Chase, but I'd probably rather have 1-2 and just take whoever's there.
So real quick, Matt, you wouldn't trade if you had Jefferson. You wouldn't trade like Jefferson in a future second-round pick to get Chase. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, there's a slight thing I would throw in. I'm not sure what that would be, but not much. I'd be just as happy with either.
Fabs, how do you feel?
Yeah, I think Matt knocked it out. You're talking about a year age difference. You're talking about a rapport with a quarterback who is one of the best in the league in Joe Burrow, and that dates back to college. And the defense certainly will factor into that. The great thing about Justin Jefferson, though, is that literally, like, it doesn't matter who the quarterback's been. Whether it's been Kirk Cousins or Nick Mullins or Joshua Dobbs, he has been very productive. So that's a good thing. The concern that you have with Chase, and it's a minimal one, is that, if Burrow goes down, the number 2 quarterback there situation is maybe not going to be conducive to Chase putting up big numbers. We saw that a couple of years ago with Jake Browning. So, but I'm still going Chase. I think the bigger conversation is between Jefferson and Lamb, because you want to talk about 2 guys who are extremely productive. They are the same age. CeeDee Lamb's career season actually is better than what Justin Jefferson's career season is. They're both averaging ballpark 20 points per game since 2022. And Dak Prescott's the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, whereas JJ McCarthy is the quarterback of the Vikings. And as much as I like McCarthy, we know what we have in Dak Prescott. We're not sure what we have in JJ McCarthy, although I do think he's in a great situation. So I think Chase is one, and there's no question about that. But the real question mark, and I'll throw Malik Neighbors in there too. I think Matt's right. He's 22 years old?
Yeah.
And look what he did last season with 4 dumpster fire quarterbacks in New York. And now he's got Russell Wilson. Okay, he's not great anymore, but he's better than what they had.
Serviceable.
Jameis,
yeah, right.
And they have a young quarterback they believe in Jackson Dart. So that to me is the conundrum and the comparison. That's where it starts at 2 with Jefferson, Lamb, and if you want to throw Malik Neighbors in there, I have no argument against it.
Matt, can I be a Cowboy homer for just a minute? Like, just
Please.
give me just a
minute,
just a minute,
like every year of your life. Go ahead.
All right. CeeDee Lamb over the last 2 years has more yards and more touchdowns than what Justin Jefferson does. And again, that's with some bad quarterback play in there as well with Cooper Rush and Trey Lance. They're the same age. I don't think CeeDee has quite the same target competition that Jefferson has, because Jefferson has Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. They want to run the ball. Again, all that kind of stuff can change. So I don't want to, I don't want to get too into that, but I think they're pretty similar. And if I can trade Jefferson for CeeDee Lamb plus X, I think I probably would do it.
Pickens doesn't worry you at all, just in terms of target share going down. 2%.
I think it's just for 1 year though, right? It's
true.
We'll see how, if it's even a year, we'll see how long Pickens lasts in Dallas. But, we've got Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota as well. I just don't think it's going to be enough for CeeDee Lamb not to have 1,300 yards and close to double-digit touchdowns. Okay,
a couple things I want to throw in is I mentioned that I'm kind of splitting hairs between Chase and Jefferson. Lamb and Neighbors to me are splitting hairs too. I don't know who number 5 is, but to me, those are 3 and 4 in whatever order.
Well, you're just getting a lot younger with Neighbors. So I can at least understand that argument. I would prefer Lamb, but again, Neighbors being 21 years old, 5 years is a big difference.
It is. And his target share is insane. And he passes the eyeball test, to say the least, too, on tape. Which is huge for me. 2 things I wanted to mention, though. If we're looking big picture, quarterbacks in Minnesota and Cincinnati, Michael mentioned Jefferson's been productive with some subpar guys.
Yeah.
What if McCarthy is above average, the best of the group, or Cousins equal? Jefferson's production could go up. Now, I'm old enough to remember Carson Palmer getting very unhappy with the Cincinnati Bengal organization too. And if Hendrickson doesn't come back and they flushed away their first round pick in Stewart, could Burrow in a year or two be like, I don't want to be here?
It's possible. I think there's just a lot more risk for me with the Bengals because not only that, I think the AFC North has traditionally some really good defenses. I mean, who has the worst defense out of the Ravens, Steelers, Browns this year? I mean, probably the Browns, and they might have the best defensive player of the year. You're also subject to playing a lot more bad weather games, whereas in Minnesota, you're guaranteed at least 9 dome games every single year. It's extremely close, and that's what we're saying. I don't think I don't think there's a definitive gap between any of these 4 guys. I mean, there's guys that I would prefer a little bit, but I wouldn't get too hung up on not being able to get guy number 1 because you got guy number 3,
Agreed.
Fabs?
Now, the top of that position is sort of, I mean, you can even consider it just personal preference. Yeah. If you believe Justin Jefferson is better than Jamar Chase and there's a situation, that could occur down the line that Matt mentioned. Sure. If you, I could see Malik Neighbors being somebody's number 1 wide receiver. I really could. Yeah. The position is that good and that deep and that young at the top. We haven't even, mentioned, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's fantastic, and Brian Thomas Jr., who's coming off a sensational rookie campaign. There's so many good wide receivers, good young wide receivers in the league right now. It's almost really splitting hairs. So if somebody came to me and said, I think Malik Neighbors is a number 1 wide receiver in Dynasty startups, I'm like, okay, I do not have a massive problem with that. Remember, this kid is coming off a season where only Brock Bowers had more catches as a rookie in NFL history. Now I get it, 17 games now, so it's a little bit skewed, but still, the fact that he did that with the quarterbacks that were playing in New York last year, and including Tommy DeVito, who's he's a fellow Paisan, but I mean, he's not that good. It's really impressive to me. So that's a good thing. If you're at the top of a startup, you're going to get a really good wide receiver and a good young wide receiver if you decide to go in that direction.
All right, let's do some startup talk. We've got a question here from Tommy about how do you do a startup draft? I need some tips and tricks for a first timer. We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, this final question comes from Tommy. He says, I'm doing my first ever startup Dynasty draft this weekend. I need some tips and tricks. Matt, you've done countless number of these drafts. Give our listener Tommy some help here.
A couple things that I really key on. At no time is it easier to acquire future first-round rookie picks than during a startup. Okay. Trade back from spot 8 to 12 or whatever. Give me your first in the rookie draft. I always leave a startup with more rookie capital going forward than I enter it with. And people get real aggressive, and some people are in win now mode. They're going to trade first, left, and right. You can often acquire several high draft picks for rookie picks by trading down and still having a really good roster. So that's something that I think is really important. And in general, early round trade downs in startups pay off in a big way. There is no Jimmy Johnson chart to say what's equal, and everyone looks at it different. And I think you can kind of get the better of things with a lot of those deals, trading draft picks during a startup. A strategy that I've never done, but I am definitely going to do, and it's a little underhanded in my next Dynasty startup, if I ever do one. Back when this show was Dynasty Blueprint, back in the way back time, when Ryan and I started it, we had a guest on, and I forget who it was. I'd love to quote him. But he starts his startups, basically not drafting any running backs. Just being.
Was it Adam Harstead? Because
I think so. I almost said that.
He made this playing very public for a while. But go ahead, please.
I mean, maybe the first running back you take is round 11, 12. And obviously, you're going to have an awesome tight end. An awesome receiving core will be amazing. And a really good quarterback. And then basically, you have a bad year, whether you like it or not, because two of your starters are subpar players. You know, they're backups, or you're churning the waiver wire throughout the year. And you end up with an early pick. And then you insert the running backs, and then you have the dynasty that we talk about, Marcus, that lasts for years and years and years and tortures the souls of your opponents.
Yeah, and I think he made this plan really popular in 2016. Like at 2015,
sounds about
he drafts
right,
all the receivers, and then in 2016, he gets the number 1 pick, drafts Ezekiel Elliott, then he goes and wins a bunch of championships. So that's a very interesting strategy.
That's how long this show's been going, I guess. Yeah. If not longer, right?
Fabs, what kind of tips do you have?
Well, first off, if you know me, you know that I love 80s hair metal. And so the first thing that comes to mind is Youth Gone Wild by Skid Row. Great song, by the way. I got a good story about Sebastian Bach at some point. We'll tell you on the program. So anyways, you're always looking towards youth. Yeah, I saw a Dynasty startup draft that someone I did a cameo for. They sent me the results, and Christian McCaffrey was in the first round. No. He's 29 years old. The guy's always hurt. You don't go in that direction. Sometimes you have to disconnect yourself from the year-to-year redraft mindset to, I need to go after youth. Now, that doesn't mean that every single player you draft has got to be under 25 years old. You want to have a little bit of a mix, but you always want to have youth, because in year one, of course, you want to win, but you also want to be able to build a roster that's going to be competitive for a long, long time. I used the example a few weeks ago, Marcus, about how I had this startup dynasty league a few years back, and I drafted a lot of really good young players, and my team was competitive in year one, but I wasn't going to win a championship. And then this past year, I blew everybody away because I had all these good young players who started to mature and become what we all thought they were going to be, which is a good thing. You also want to be taking chances on younger players at the back half of your draft. Okay, and I'm going to use the example, and this one didn't work out, but Kamani Vidal last season was 100% worth a late flyer just because what the hell, he's young and we don't know what's going on with the Chargers backfield. You never know when you might stumble upon a hidden gem. So you want to make sure that you know depth charts and what depth charts might have veteran guys on their way out, guys who are injured, and then below them, some young guys who maybe, Tyrone Tracy, all of a sudden we weren't talking about him. And then he was, fantastic for a part of last season. Another thing is, and Matt talked about trades. There's always this motto that I have: all's fair in love and fantasy football. And that means that if somebody in your league is hurting, and I'm going to give you an example of this, do not be afraid to prey on them. Be a salesman. Last year, I have a dynasty league that's a super flex league. So obviously quarterbacks are really valuable. And we all know the last couple of years, especially 2 years ago, quarterbacks were dropping like flies. And I was in a league and I have Anthony Richardson, stupid Fabs. I drafted him thinking he'd be good, right? And all of a sudden I was hurting and people were trying to trade me like Joe Flacco for a future second round pick. And somebody did it. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? A second round pick for Joe Flacco. He's 41 years old. Sometimes people are going to be nervous and feel like they need to make a move that they might not otherwise make. I always want to do that. I want to compile picks. Joe Flacco for a second round pick, please give me that all day long in a rookie only draft. So those are a couple of things that I like to, and the second one's not very nice, especially because you're probably playing in a league with your friends, but screw them. You want to win the championship, right? You want that belt around your waist or over your shoulder when the season's over. So make sure you keep tabs on what other rosters look like and what they might need and where you might be able to snag, a second round pick or a third round future pick for a player who really isn't worth it.
If you don't spot the sucker at the poker table right away, you're the sucker.
Right. Exactly. Like Jerry Jones, he's the sucker.
Right.
Jerry Jones is always the sucker.
Back to the Cowboys.
You mentioned Jimmy Johnson, by the way, and that kind of brought a tear to my eye. Don't bring that. That's bad, man. I miss him so much. All right, go ahead anyways.
And if like that Flacco deal goes down, you go talk to that owner behind the scenes about any kind of trade. If he's willing to do that for Flacco, like, I'm just going to drop him an email and just see how he's doing. You know,
you don't think
Check
that
in.
NFL GMs do that to Jerry Jones? I'm sorry, Marcus. You know you're going to get mad at me. But after he gives a fourth for freaking Trey Lance and a fourth for Jonathan Mingo, that other GMs around the league aren't saying, you know what, we may be able to get something good from Jerry over here.
Is this
they're
Locked on
definitely
Cowboys or
doing
Locked on
that.
Dynasty? I forgot. That's all right. It's the last tip that I wanted to give. I think Matt and I actually disagree with this a little bit, but that's okay. Don't be a slave to ADP. And one of the things that I've said for a while is that fantasy football is supposed to be fun. So I'm willing to reach a little bit to have players on my team that I enjoy watching. For example, Drake London is one of my favorite players in the league. He's being drafted as wide receiver 10, wide receiver 9. I just might like him a lot more than Amon-Ra St. Brown. I understand that Amon-Ra is ranked higher, but I want London on my team. So don't be afraid to, kind of steer away from ADP, because ADP is going to change a lot between now and midway through the season. Kind of go out and get your guys. Not only will you probably be right if you have, conviction on some of these players, you're going to enjoy your fantasy team a little bit more. And I know, Matt, a lot of times you just want the best guys. Sometimes I just want the guys that I want to root for.
Yeah. I'm not a slave to ADP at all, but
of course,
if there's a player that also likes to beat up grandmas, he can be on my team. I don't care.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? As
before,
long as he
right?
scores fantasy points. I mean, I'm not getting my favorite players so I can root for them. I'm getting the guys that score the most fantasy points.
Yeah,
I don't have to hang out with them in the locker room.
We've talked about, like, your fantasy team doesn't necessarily need a moral compass, right?
No.
So just get the guys that can perform. But on the flip side, there are guys that I just want to root for. And if it's close and they're, in the same tier, it's okay to go get your guys.
I'm in a dynasty league with a huge Packers fan. He'll overpay for a Packer every day of the week.
Yep.
Fine.
Yeah.
I mean, if that makes you happy, great. But I'm going to rake you over the coals for Golden or Reed or whoever,
Whoever. Fabs, any last tips before we head out?
I like the term, slave to ADP. That just reminded me of Slave to the Grind by Skid Row. Anyways, I'm getting off track again. But I think that Marcus makes a good point, because fantasy football is supposed to be fun. And I have CeeDee Lamb in one of my dynasty leagues, and I love it because, even though I hate Jerry Jones, I want CeeDee Lamb to do well. I've been a Cowboys fan for my whole life, although this year I'm another story. So I like that, right? There's players that I want to root for. I'm sure Marcus probably wants to have Michael Penix Jr. because he likes Michael Penix Jr. He's a fan of that kid, and you want to have him on your team. And, when it's dynasty, it's more intimate because, fantasy football redrafts is just like a fling, right? But dynasty is like a marriage. It's a relationship and it's long-term. And so you like to see these guys come in, you draft them hoping that they're going to reach their statistical expectations. And if they do, you almost feel like a proud fantasy manager papa, because that player popped for you and is going to be on your roster for a long time.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Matt on Twitter at Williamson NFL. You can follow Fabs at Michael_Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.